Hey, welcome to our first ever, maybe only, or maybe first of many podcasts. Right now, we're calling it Tech Talk Team Room. Is that right? Yeah, Tech Talk Team Room.
Yep.
I guess we'll get into a little bit more why we're calling it that later on in the discussion. But the concept is that, the good ideas, I don't want to call it innovation, we'll call it good ideas. Most of those good ideas happen, around tables like this, or in a team room, or on the back porch, or at a bar, talking about how to improve support to, in this case, special operations. I know that our background has told us that, those types of talks have led to some incredible capabilities for the force. So, but before we get started, I kind of want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this and what we hope to accomplish besides keeping us from looking like fools, which we may end up doing. And those that know us, probably it's an eventuality that we'll do that. But before I get to introducing the rest of the team here on the podcast, I wanted to start with kind of a relationship with the guy to my left here, Steve Trevino. Steve, retired Command Sergeant Major, 30 years in special operations. But the first time I met Steve Trevino was in 1998. Mm-hmm. I was a young captain coming out of 2nd Ranger Battalion, and I was on my way to the Joint Communications Unit. And en route from Fort Lewis to Fort Bragg, they were sending me to Halo School. And so I get out there to the school, and I meet up with two guys from JCU, and Steve was one of them. And Steve had two tasks in going to this course. The first task was to try to actually make it through the course, which, by the way, you didn't make it through that one. You had to go back, but that's another story.
It was an injury.
Yeah.
It was an injury.
Ouch.
But probably the equally important task that Steve had was checking out the new ops officer and making sure that he was fit for service in the unit. And so that was in 1998. And Steve and I have been serving together in various assignments, in and out of uniform, since then, without a lot of breaks in between.
Not many, no.
And, so, we have a lot of history, some of it great, some of it, we might fight in the parking lot by the end of this. But we've had a long-standing relationship, and a lot of the discussions that we are going to have today are things that we've talked about all the time. So that's back 1998. Fast forward to 9/11. Obviously 9/11 changed everything, changed the way special operations fights. It fundamentally changed how communicators supported special operations. There's lots of podcasts out there about SOF. You cannot go on Spotify and see and not find a podcast about, selection, Ranger Regiment. There I was, knee deep in grenade pins. Those are all great. But there's really nothing that we have seen that really gets at the technical side of the support to special operations. And, so that's what, we're trying to get at here. So after 9/11, we wouldn't use the term innovation as much as we would use,
Good ideas.
Yeah, figure this shit out. We had, a lot of pressure, a lot of change, distributed C2, unblinking eye, globally connected secure comms, from tactical to strategic. Mm-hmm. There was a lot going on. But along the way, SOF, whether it be the operator side of SOF or the support side of SOF, produced some of the most innovative minds and some of the most innovative capabilities in the U.S. government. But what we also kind of wished away some of the things that we now look at as real threats. We look at what we did back then, and in some cases, we've probably said, would we do that again? How would we do that different? And that's one of the things that we're going to try to get at in these type of podcasts. So 25 years later, fast forward past 9/11, 25 years later, most of the people that were in that post 9/11 fight, they're out of uniform now. But the amount of people that are supporting special operations in industry, it's mind-boggling. And I didn't really appreciate this until I went to my first, SOF week after retiring from the Army. And they take a JCU picture, JCU alumni picture, and there was at least 50, 60 people in this picture. And I was like, that is incredible that there is that much talent, expertise, intellect, in one place directly supporting SOF. And so Steve and I started talking like, how do we get those people to actually get together and have like real conversations that can connect capabilities, that can synergize requirements for SOF to deliver something that maybe the acquisition process just doesn't lend itself to do, as well as a group of very smart, very focused, very experienced professionals that understand what it takes to innovate. And again, back to the concept of this podcast, the team room, tech team room is, again, those people are most effective in talking about how to get things done in a casual setting, smoking cigars around the fire pit, or at 2:00 in the morning in the hotel in Tampa during SOF week. I mean, that's where the greatest ideas come from. And then we all leave after SOF week and we kind of go back to our, wherever we, happen to reside in industry. So what can we do to bring those people together, have conversations, innovate, come up with good ideas, and then see what we can do about them? Solve problems. That's what we're trying to do. So big picture, we're trying to bring those people together into a podcast-like event. Today, what we're really trying to get at is SOF Week is happening in 2 weeks. We have a very specific discussion topic to get at. Most people that are, if anybody is listening to this, you probably also heard about Signalgate and all of the things that have happened in the political space around mobility and security and the friction between the speed of decision making and the requirement for security. And so we have had several conversations with the team that's around this table to kind of talk about those issues. And we're hoping that this conversation today will lead to some more pointed conversations at SOF Week. We're all going to be there. We're going to be partnered in a booth at SOFtact or at SOF Week. SOFtact Solutions has a booth. We are partnered in a booth with Provoro and Quantinium at SOF Week, and we're looking forward to having those conversations. And so with that, Steve, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the smart guys at this table, and let's get at it.
The smart guys minus me, right? No, thanks, Sam. It's good stuff. And just for the record, right, because it is a team room discussion, right? I got harassed. I got hurt. I came back early, but I went right back. Harassment stopped. Just part of the team room. Listen, I really do appreciate you guys, taking the time to come out and have these discussions. We've got right now Michael Campbell from Provoro, President and General Manager, former 05 battalion commander, within the SOF community, out doing wonderful things. Now, we've been partners with you guys, I think now, 2 years, 2.5 years?
No, man, I think it's even been 3 or 4.
It might be 3 or 4 now, right? And things have gone well, right? Things have gone really well. Obviously, the customers are liking the technology, right? It's obviously a gap that we needed to fill a few years ago. But quite frankly, has worked very well. And obviously, right, wanted to go the next level up in these discussions we've had in the past. I think some of these were actually in SOF Week at the hotel lobby at 2 in the morning.
I'm sure.
But in comes Quantinium. We got Roy Stephan, who is Senior Solutions Architect for Quantinium. Roy is going to help us out. Been partners, 6-7 months by now, maybe?
Yeah, it's pretty new, but excited. I've spent 20 years supporting the military, supporting different innovation from the commercial side, and getting this opportunity to talk about how quantum computers are helping the soft community, which is really where the rubber meets the road, and introducing this new technology using the experience that folks like you have introducing so many technologies over the years is really what's so important.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of promise here. And I think as we get into the discussions and actually have this candid conversation, I think people may have a better understanding, right, of where quantum security, especially, and the things we're going to talk about, where that really does fit. And how quick it can be facilitated, right? And that's a big thing for us. We also have Paul Gross, right, former retired CW5 Command Chief Warrant Officer. Paul again has got a litany over 30 years of EW and cyber experience. He's a legend. And so, Paul, appreciate you being with us. Hoping that you keep us straight. Again, I'm the dumbest guy in the room, like I normally am, and so, but certainly looking forward to your input and things that right, the experiences that you've had. I think the biggest piece in part, at least when we put the panel together, was there are some folks in a green suit still today, but back the time we're talking, there were some folks that were serving 10, 15 years ago that could see, with the innovation that we're talking about, could see where this was going to end up. And unfortunately, right, there's really not much you could do outside of warn people of the risks. And I use that to segue into, the type of conversation and discussion that we need to have. And we call it, Tech Talk Team Room, is because these are the discussions that people don't normally hear. If you heard Sam, right, when he was talking about a lot of the good ideas and things that we just, shit we had to get done. Yeah. And it was almost every night, right? I need to be able to talk to this person and that person, and oh, by the way, there's no one there. Like, shit. I mean, how do we figure? Okay, we need to figure that shit out. Like, okay. 9 times out of 10, those conversations were happening in a little room, or in a team room with a bunch of dirty guys in there drinking beer, doing whatever else. And all these discussions, right, stay in that room. Something may proliferate after that. There are things today I can tell you about, right? Name the country that came out of those rooms. And then you fast forward, right? And we just talked about it. It's a PowerPoint presentation. We've all had to do them. We've all had to sit in them. Name the briefing or the conference that you're sitting in, and it's all timed and scripted and all that great stuff. And the real discussion happens where, right? At the whatever event's happening after the actual conference, right? Yeah. Well, those are the discussions that no one ever hears, right? And so we want to have those discussions here, and in hopes, right, that people listen, right? I mean, they can disagree. That's okay too.
One of the things that I just thought about it, that we've got discussion around quantum computing, discussion around mobile security, and a subject matter expert on how the military built the cyber force. Right. But if you think back to when we were doing our figure it out kind of thing, the communicators were like, they're in the background. They're like, I don't want the leaders, commanders, they didn't really care how it got done. They just wanted it to work. And as long as it was working, the communicators were completely silent. Well, today, that's completely different. Now commanders fully understand the risks around their communications networks, the risks of their cyber threat, the demands on their computing capacity. All those things are now really operational requirements for commanders. Commanders don't have the ability to say, hey, you commo guys, just make it so. We were kind of fortunate, I guess, that we just kind of were able to do that. But now the comms plan and the cyber plan, the electronic warfare plan, all of those things are, front and center for the commander. So the people that we got talking here today, it's probably much more relevant than it was like when we were kind of doing this post 9/11 as communicators. It was the intel officer that was sitting at the front of the table with the commander, and the communicators were back in their comm centers or tactically on the ground communicating. Whereas today, all these things are absolutely paramount to protecting the force. And so it's just a much more prevalent in the minds of commanders, which I think is good for like discussions at Soft Week for these type of things to be brought up to leaders.
I think maybe on the producing, the legalities, the policies and things to get things done quicker or whatever else. I mean, I think that the difference too is the engagement, right? The space. Maybe it'd have been different if we weren't at war, right? Or we weren't in an operation or whatever else. I don't know that they didn't care. They just didn't have time.
Well,
right?
the threat was different.
Yeah, and it was.
The threat was very different.
I'll be honest with you, right? I would prefer what we had before versus what may be today. I'll just figure it out. Don't ask any questions. You'll just get what you want. But, very similar to those type discussions, because I think that is relevant, certainly worth talking about. When you look at the breakup typically, right, in a team room, right, and it's always that everybody plays a different part every time. If you guys remember team rooms, right? The one guy or, whoever it is, right, it's, I got an idea. What about this? Well, there's always the asshole, right? Like, you suck, you're dumb, right? Go away. You got the digit heads, right? They're always in there. So as soon as someone says, I got an idea, they're writing ones and zeros and the clicks and the clucks come out. And you have all that stuff going on. And then you've got the folks that just kind of hang around and just waiting to get after something. And I think when you look at the breakup of the room, we have that, right? You have someone, I had an idea, like, okay, that's great. And someone else, they're like, you're a dumbass, right? And then you got the smart guys in the room, right, that'll say, yeah, that you can't do that.
Yeah.
Here's how we do all this stuff. And so I'm excited to have this discussion. And so I'll start this discussion off, right, Michael? We're going to go to Pavoro.
Yeah, please.
We do have an article out that we just published, right? A couple more coming out specifically for Soft Week, but it talks about, obviously the things that Pavoro is contributing, the things that Pavoro is doing for the customers, for the force, for the commands with regards to mobile obfuscation, mobility security, right? So the one question, and I'll hand it over to you to talk about Pavoro and what you guys are doing and what you've done, what's next. And Sam and I have had this discussion, especially over the last 2 weeks, over and over. If you knew 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago, you knew what the risks and the vulnerabilities would be with EUDs today. Not just right in the DoD, on the ground with military, everywhere. If you knew then,
smartphones,
right, what a smartphone's vulnerabilities and risks would be 30 years later, and you had the decision, right, you could make a decision on whether or not we continue on with that innovation. What would your answer be? Right? You don't have to answer that now. Right, I'll hand it over to you to talk about Pavoro.
Yeah.
But just to put it in there, right? If I had that power 30 years ago, the answer would be no.
I heard you say that.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
You would say no.
I would say no. I could do without. But
Yeah.
I'll hand it to you.
All right.
I bet you can't go 5 minutes without it. Though.
I bet you
Unless you're in the Masters. You go to the Masters, you can do
Man.
without it.
Well, and I think that's a challenge, but it makes sense. But let me defend how I would not have said no, or wouldn't say no even today, especially, and give context too. So I like the team room concept. It reminds me of being in what's called a TAC, right, or a small forward command center that has to go conduct some operation, right, which typically is it's got a commander of some level, an ops officer at some level, an intel officer, and a communications officer, and usually a really smart warrant officer of some sort who actually runs most of the stuff going on. And then a security team making sure we don't get shot up. But that group's doing the same thing too. We're trying to figure out how to do command and control of an operation that's going on all around us. And the mission of that TAC, the whole function of the forward command center, the TAC in this case that I'm using as an example, is command and control. It's communications. It's not security of those communications. It's execute the communications in a way that's understandable, fast, and relevant, right? So leaders who grow up through the ranks are used to the speed of decision, right? I need to make a decision that's timely and relevant. Unfortunately, a lot of times, you're always going to default. Maybe fortunately or unfortunately, you're going to default to what's easiest. I've been in those forward command center type situations, and we might have, let's say we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of super secure communications gear. A lot of times that stuff gets pushed to the side gently. Sometimes it gets thrown out the window. And they pick up, over the decades now, they'll pick up a commercial mobile device. Those were originally one way, capable of only doing a little bit. But today they're capable of doing so much more. And that's why I push back on you'd say no. If you said no, you'd have to replace that no with but let me show you how in a different way. But that still meets that speed of decision, speed of control, and relevance, so that ultimately the boss, the commander, whoever has to make those rapid decisions is satisfied that the intent and mission is going to be successful. In today's world, and actually I feel like this world has now existed for decades, it's just continuing to become a commercial mobile device of some sort, right? It's just so much more efficient, so much smaller, so much continued innovation that there's just nothing else out there that can completely replace it or replace it almost in any way. So,
especially now they're adding, you can get on the satellite on
T-Mobile, yeah. But here's the thing, though, right? I mean,
argue with me about it.
Well, no, I'm not going to argue with you about it, Mike. I'm not really the asshole. But here's what I would say to that, right? Here's my counter to that, right? I think truly, right? At 30 years ago, especially when we were knee deep in figuring shit out, we were all there. It was really an era, right, of get
it done,
right? It really was. I mean, there are some things out there. I mean, somebody would come up, and again, right? It wasn't like they were asking a question. It was, here's what I want, and then you'd sit there like that. That doesn't even exist, man, right? I mean, where did he get that from? Like that doesn't make any sense. But you figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I think really, right? We were in an era of can we?
Yeah.
Well, if you look at all the technological advances that have happened in the last 3 decades, right? I'm wondering if the era that if we should pivot, right? Because there's a lot of advances, things that you're talking about, right? Especially with regards to a smartphone and others, right? And this is where, I think Roy will come in and Paul certainly will come in, right? It's probably a time, right, where maybe we pivot to an era of should we?
Right.
Well, I mean, again, think of it that way, right?
Yeah.
I mean, should we?
Well, and that gets to should we? All right. So the modern mobile device, which we're bouncing around that conversation, but it's a now decades old, multi-trillion-dollar industry that's continued to innovate. Started out with big ass bag phones, and today you've got a supercomputer that you put in your pocket, and almost every citizen in the world carries one. Right? There's probably 1 billion smartphones in use right now in the world. A warfighting organization that wants to be relevant, that wants to be fast and innovative, is it going to, in some capacity, leverage that? Or is it going to do its own thing, right? So, think about all the stuff that the military or heaven forbid, just regular government, but military does for itself. It's so clunky by comparison, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't innovate, and it typically just becomes a jobs program for some system integrator to milk the government on.
We can't stick our head in the sand and say, we don't like this technology, so we're just not going to use it, right? And we spent a lot of time shouting till we're blue in the face, training people how to do things that are not natural in order for them to do it in a more secure way. And we need to shift and look more at how people are operating and make that secure so that it's more natural, following their natural ability to get stuff done in a fast and optimized way, but being able to secure that.
Absolutely.
As opposed to telling them, don't do things optimized, but do it this.
So going back to your original statement, right, the problem isn't really the technology. It's that if you go back and look at the history of the internet, right, when, universities were passing information back and forth, where it started, and then the World Wide Web, the problem was no one then envisioned security. No one thought about security. That was the last thing. It was like, hey, we're going to have this free flow of information. No one envisioned hackers. No one envisioned, people stealing data and doing what we've seen. And that's actually the biggest issue with a lot of it is that lack of security. And then it's hard to build that in as an afterthought, right? So going forward, as we go forward, I think, the security needs to be baked in. Right, from the beginning. And if we don't do that, we're just going to repeat this cycle over and over. We're going to come up with something, the next latest and greatest capability, and then we're going to be in the same situation like, hey, it's, it's not secure, so now how do we secure it, or how do we move on to the next thing? I think as we go forward, especially, we're talking about helping the soft community innovate. That needs to be one of the primary things. Like no matter what it is, we have to figure out how to secure it first.
You know, it's interesting, right?
Well, I like that approach. I mean, I agree with it. But there's limits, right? There's stuff that exists now that's needed. Like, you know, it's a thing that we've all agreed is relevant, makes my job easier, et cetera.
Yes.
Let's figure out what the risks are and mitigate those risks versus let's build new, right? My argument is don't build new, right? There's nothing ever, I think, in the history of government that if they start it and build it new that actually ends up being better than what the industry would do from a
Well, it's too
consumer
expensive to do it.
Right. But
Quick,
I know
man.
that might actually be controversial.
The cost is too much too.
Right.
To-
Well,
to
yes
start
and
all
no.
over.
But I
right?
think I'm right.
Well, you know, maybe. I think Paul's right. You know, there's
Yeah.
a challenge though. You know, when you divide the sectors, right? You know, on the DoD side, and I'm going to use one of the smartest guys I've ever known, right? You know, Rob Flaker, my Pizzo. You know, Rob always came out with, you know, the DoD and specific organizations, you know, primarily, right? They operate in what is considered constraints and restraints, right? Constraints being things you must do,
Yeah.
restraints being things you can't do.
Yeah.
And so somewhere in the middle is what's allowed, and it's not very large. And so when you look at the technological advances, right, on the industry side or commercial side, and maybe they've not looked at security as much as they should have in the past, but today, right, income quantinuum, they are. But on the DoD side, right, it's a little bit slower. And oh, by the way, even if there was, let's say, a Quantinuum or someone else, another partner, right, does it fit within that real small corridor, you know, in between constraints and restraints? And I'd say about 80% of the time, if it wasn't STIG, DISO approved, and all these other great things, right, you just don't even get them in the door. And so how much of that innovation and technology and security are they missing? That's probably a separate podcast, right? Would definitely like to have you back for that one, Paul. But it does give a good segue into previous candid bar discussions, right? That have led us to the partnerships that we have today to solve some of these security problems. So, Michael, if you remember, it was Soft Week. And so, what we've been trying to do for the last 4 or 5 years, right? And it was just a terminology that never really took off. It was that tech merger, right? And what we wanted to do for our existing customers and customers out there that may want to come over and you know, have us do some business and solve some problems was, you know, let me. There isn't one organization right now that I'm aware of that's going to solve every one of your problems, right?
No.
And so if you're a government agency, chances are you're going to have to do 7 different contracts for 7 different things to solve this one big problem. We've been trying to leverage partners, right, to team up, and get after a problem set. And so it's a single entity, a partnered solution. And it's hard, man, right? There's a lot of folks out there that just don't want to partner up. But you guys, you know, and a few others, right, have done well with that. And that was over a discussion, right? It was just, I met Roy.
Yep, I understand.
We talked, right? And it was like, hey, wait a minute. Wait, everything you're doing right now in Provoro to support mobile security and the things that you're doing with Onyx, the things you're doing with, you know, the safe case, the things that you're providing the customers already to help, right, sanitize or secure that digital footprint. You know, what else could we do? Hey, I met this guy, in comes Roy from Quantinuum, and it seems like if we put you guys together, there might be a solution there that we can provide a level of quantum security, right, to the cloud management links or any other disaggregated link out there that's, you know, founded on AES-256 or name the software security. And so, you know, Roy, I know again, right, you know, our partnership is in its infancy, but is already, you know, in my mind is done very well. I know, you know, you guys in Provoro have got along pretty well, but tell us a little bit about Quantinuum, how you guys are partnering up so that we can double back with Provoro.
Yeah. And before Roy jumps in, I didn't even answer your question, I think, fully. So I was just getting into some context, like risk mitigation. So I was just trying to set the stage saying that, look, the world is going to run on a smartphone. So military operations, et cetera, that don't accept the fact that you're going to carry a mobile device are probably not being realistic at this point. And that's both from a command and control perspective and also from edge operator perspective. I mean, I think in the news today, it's like the future of infantry operations in the field is going to be based on EUD, where they're going to wear it for command and control, They're going to wear it to replace or augment mostly replace existing radio systems with phones.
Yeah.
And then they got the new world, which is drones and robotics and, basically wearable healthcare type things that everybody's going to need, right? That's the future. Can you imagine a military in the future that doesn't have all these technologies? 10 years from now, or even 5 years from now. So you would ask me, said, hey, what is Provoro doing? Provoro is just saying, like, look, we can't, the government will never build a mobile device successfully. They've attempted it in the past. It doesn't work. I could name it if you want.
No.
It's a multi-billion-dollar effort, and it resulted in a brick that probably wasn't even good enough to keep a door open. But if you address the risk in a mobile device is, active espionage. Can it be used to spy against you? And then tracking, because it's a walking radio system. And then the malware that gets uploaded into it that allows you to observe what goes on with it. So if you can mitigate those risks, which is what Provoro made its mission of, can you mitigate those risks so that I can continue to use this trillion-dollar device, essentially, this trillion-dollar industry to do military operations, then we've got something. But what we've learned, and this gets to what Roy will jump in on here, is we're not good enough, right? We're just a part of the ecosystem that solves the problem. There's a lot of other aspects, and there's evolving security risks that are beyond us. So I think, Roy, if you accepting that, hey, if I can carry the mobile device, we've mitigated the risk on the edge with the mobile device itself, whether it's at a headquarters or it's an infantry man or woman maneuvering around out there. What happens next, right? Because I still got to do other things.
Right. Yeah, I think that's why quantum computing is so such a good partnership with Provoro and what you're doing, because you're able to block the phone from doing things you don't want it to do. And when we talk about being able to leverage quantum levels of encryption, when we talk about being able to leverage quantum randomness to improve our security and improve our connection, that's for when you want the phone to be able to communicate. So sometimes you want it to stop, and sometimes you want it to go, right? And where you guys can make it stop on demand. And then we can help it go even under extreme nation state style attacks where you need to be able to communicate. All the things you're talking about in terms of UAVs, in terms of robotics, in terms of everything else, require an underlying ubiquitous computing where everybody has to be connected all the time in order to control those assets, in order to report back, in order to have an understanding of what's happening. It's not as autonomous as a human force that gets deployed that has its own ability to make decisions, may be able to operate in a disconnected mode more effectively over longer periods of time than some of this automation. And what happens is we're increasingly relying on the network. We're increasingly relying on the security of that network, especially encryption. Mm-hmm. And with quantum computers coming into their own, and for those of you that don't know, Quantinium builds quantum computers. We have 200 plus quantum PhDs on staff. It's really impressive what's happening in the quantum computing space. And leveraging quantum mechanics is a little bit like using the Force, right? It has a light side and a dark side that holds the universe together.
Well said.
Okay, and it's this in some respects almost mystical force because it's so complex. It's not easily understood in a soundbite. But there are negatives to it, right? Quantum computers are going to be able to crack a lot of our current encryption standards. And we're looking at the next 5 years or so where most of the industry is suspecting they'll be able to crack those devices. So when you think about the things that you're buying today and putting into your network, deploying into the field, those devices are still going to be around in 5 years. And they're going to be more and more vulnerable as quantum computers advance to the point where they can break it. But the quantum computers can also be used for good, right? There's a light side of the Force as well as a dark side. So some of the things that you can do today is leveraging the randomness of a quantum computer, which far exceeds the randomness capabilities of a classical machine, to build better encryption. And randomness is the basis of encryption. All your encryption keys that you've ever heard about, your encryption algorithms, they all use randomness. And if you can have better randomness, you have a better foundation for all of your encryption. So being able to take quantum computers and apply the light side, the positive, the goodness, in order to help security is really important. And that's important with randomness. It's going to be important with quantum networking and quantum key distribution. All these technologies, we're looking maybe 5 to 10 years out at replacing the entire way that the networking world even works. So being able to be prepared for that kind of a massive shift and being able to understand what that's going to do to an operational environment is a big challenge. It's a really big challenge.
Well, those devices that in 5 years they'll be able to be cracked. Will those, do you see from an industry perspective, or the kind of the infrastructure that it will be dated? Will it be able to be like retrofitted, or is all that going to have to be like?
So yeah, so there's a lot of work that's going on. NIST just released some new standards in the fall about algorithms that classical machines can use to better protect themselves against some of the advantages a quantum computer has. Because a quantum computer is different than a classical computer. So at a fundamental level, a computer has bits and bytes, ones and zeros as their bits, and a quantum computer has qubits, which can be 1 and 0 at the same time, and superposition and everything in between. And it's fundamentally a different beast, and it behaves in different ways. And there are some things classical computers are good at, and some things they're very bad at. Well, they happen to be very bad at encryption and breaking encryption, which is why it's worked so long. Quantum computers are going to be able to break some of those encryption algorithms. So we're changing the algorithms to be more challenging for quantum computers. But we're entering a world where quantum computers are changing and shifting the threat. Artificial intelligence is changing and shifting the threat. There may be other custom designed machines that aren't AI or quantum that add to that threat. So being able to increase your security is important.
Well, I think, again, right, I mean, when we got this partnership together, obviously, for folks that are listening, hopefully our folks that are listening, right, go out and read the articles. And, I think the foundation here is the preparation, right? We didn't do that well enough in the past. We understand kind of lessons learned, right? It's preparing for what's to come. You've mentioned over, right, 5 to 10 years. Everything that I've read so far, it's closer to 5. And I think we've talked about it, right? I know certainly I brought it up to Sam and Michael, right? Still to this day, right? It freaks me the fuck out. Harvest now, exploit later is crazy. Yeah. It's just crazy talk. But what does that mean, right? I mean, what are our adversaries doing, right?
Right.
In my mind, right? And I've read about it here recently. It's Space Race 2, if you believe we landed on the moon and all that crap. But the idea behind it, right, is well,
hey, come on.
1969 technology. Yeah, okay. But nonetheless, right, the idea is that we are now at a race with our adversaries to get to a quantum solution, right, that facilitates and or cracks those classic computer, algorithms and things of that nature for security. That's significant, right? And so new race to the moon, right? Where do you think we are? Does it implicate only the systems and networks that Michael was mentioning and the edge and things of that nature? Or is that holistic? Is that, your spouse, your family members, people walking up and down the street with a smartphone, or name the technological device? I mean, where are those vulnerabilities and risks should our adversaries reach a quantum solution before us? And what does that really mean?
And even more important when we're talking about, the military or the software, the military as a whole, how do we build a training program? How do we train quantum mechanics? We're not all going to be PhDs. They're not going to have PhDs in quantum mechanics.
I'll take care of that.
How do we teach? How do we train and teach the folks? How do we get to TRADOC and teach this from the basic levels up? Yeah. Has there been any thought put into that, or just, I know, a lot of your guys are probably up here in the stratosphere,
But you know what? That's a good point, though, right? Yeah. I mean, you think about the industry. We've had this discussion over and over again, right? Even when we were still in green suits. You guys are, you're different, right? Because you're a hybrid, right? Yeah. You have the understanding of being the guy on the ground and being the customer. Yeah. And nothing against our Quantinium brothers out there, right? But they're PhDs, right? I mean, and they're coming up with some pretty good shit. But from a on-the-ground experience, understanding how our folks think, how commanders make decisions, what they need to make decisions, how things are implemented, the acquisition process alone, right? And Paul brings up a great point. Even if your guys had a training model, they could train Roy all day long, right? Because you're that Superman guy, right?
Yeah, but it's got to be more accessible, right?
Well, it's got to be
Yeah.
like, I'll tell you, nug proof, right?
Yeah.
You're not handing, whatever Roy, took to learn quantum. You're not handing that over to, Private Humpty Swat, right? That guy or gal ain't going to get that shit.
So let me give you an example. So one of the products that we developed, right? It pulls from the quantum computer and it develops this quantum randomness, and then we're able to package it as software, where it's an RPM install into a Linux kernel, which means your average IT admin can take less than 15 minutes to run one command and have this installed, and then the operator doesn't even know it's there. It's just happening behind the scenes. All the applications that are running on that device are being updated and upgraded to this higher level of security, completely behind the scenes, and it can be patch deployed to systems that are already in the field through your normal patch management process. So we call it sort of democratizing the effects of the quantum computer, right?
And this
Being
is
able
something
to
that is part of
make that accessible. Yeah.
of the kind of standard DoD encryption protocols. Like you're making that. This is assuming that these are approved keys in the way that the approval authorities that grant those. They say this meets those thresholds.
So it is a challenge, right? We take a quantum computer into NIST and we say authorize this to make keys, and the head kind of explodes, right?
That's where I'm going. Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time when I joined the company a couple of years ago architecting how NIST could authorize what we do. We actually received our NIST authorization in the fall. So it absolutely flows in to the NIST process. If you're familiar with FIPS, if you're familiar with commercial solutions for classified environments, right? NIAP, common criteria, all of those requirements build off of the NIST. It's called an ESV, which is entropy source validation. But being able to prove that you have strong randomness. Our certification says full entropy, which is the highest level that NIST is able to issue. So we did find ways that we could bring our solution in and in a way that NIST could authorize it. It was a real challenge. It's a real challenge, and some of the things that we do, NIST doesn't know how to recognize the value that we add, but we designed the system in a way that it met all of the minimum requirements for NIST. So even if people didn't understand what we did, they understood that it was no less secure than anything else they implemented. And that gave us an opportunity then to have the discussions about all the added advantages that we can bring to the table, which even NIST doesn't have a special certification yet because it's too new. But we had to make sure we were at least exceeding the bar so there was no possibility of a negative effect, right? Yeah. That it was all additive.
Yeah, but go back to, right, where do you, again, I'm going to go right back to all that's great. Yeah. And I think Paul is correct, right? In the preparation for securing what we know is coming and making certain that our customers, right, understand the reality, understand what we're trying to do and why. The vulnerabilities and the risks, right? Where do they lie? Where do you think we are?
Let's go back to the Harvest Now that you mentioned earlier. There may be some people who aren't familiar with that type of attack, right? And the basic concept there is that a few years from now, let's say 5 years from now or so, people are going to, nation states in particular, people that can afford it, are going to be able to decrypt RSA, elliptical curve, some of the common algorithms that you use every day, that people in the military use, that people use when they submit their credit card payments online, banking, et cetera. And we have new algorithms, but it's going to take a long time to swap out the old algorithms for the new ones. They were just approved in the fall, and it is going to take years. Some people are estimating 20 years or more based on how long it's taken to replace older algorithms that have been broken and that are still out there in use today.
Can you imagine the amount of information and data that's compromised over that time? That's what I'm talking about, right? I mean, those are the things that we have to talk about, right? Everybody likes to talk about the things they always talk about. How much does it cost? How do you implement it? How long does it take? Hey, man, how about we talk about real shit? Like all the things you're trying to hide, they're not a secret anymore, right? Yeah. I mean, that shit's getting ready to be let out.
Right.
And so, the other piece to that is we're not just talking about, DOD and military. We're talking about banks, right? I mean, maybe, I don't have a lot of money, but the money I have, I don't want anybody to take it, right? I'll just put it under my mattress if that's the case, right? But here shortly, someone is going to have, outside of this nation, right? Someone is going to have the ability to reach in and pull whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and along those lines, so if we go back and say that, look, military operations and actually every citizen in the world are using mobile devices. The reality is the mobile device and commercial mobile and all that technology that makes mobile possible is a fundamental capability going forward, right? Mm-hmm. So then somebody out there might say, well, that doesn't matter because even if we use the mobile device, we're probably going to encrypt it with this thing called high assurance, HAPI, nation state level encryption. Which does exist, and that's the thing most people are trained to use, right? It's an encryption technology that is, nation state level protected. It's a big deal for the United States. It's a big deal for the military to make and use. But then, all right, fundamentally though, we're shifting. Like we're going to shift. We're going to go mobile device. We're going to stop focusing on, what we would define as major theater war, and we're going to focus on operations that are everything else plus major theater war. We need the ability to carry mobile devices, do command and control, collaborate, make decisions, and it's going to use every single existing mobile enabling technology, which is the backbone of the world today. And that rides on the back of commercial encryption. So commercial encryption. Which Roy just said, look, the reality is commercial encryption is going to get cracked. So even if we all just say, we don't need to worry about it because we're going to use high assurance encryption, nation state level, type 1 encryptors, whatever, and we just trust that those are not going to get compromised, and we're not going to worry about the rest of it because that stuff doesn't matter. The reality is that is not the reality. So we have to prepare ourselves. How are we going to encrypt the reality of the world that we're in today? I mean, the reality of the world we're in today is we're going to use mobile devices, and we're going to ride the backbone of the commercial mobile systems.
And some of those U.S. military systems aren't available to coalition forces, depending on the level of coalition.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, would you offer that the same solution set that we were working on together with, coincided with Provoro and that single set solution to secure not only the device itself, but the management links that come along with it? With that same, again, software, right? That's the big so what here, right? It's a software embedded, no hardware.
No hardware.
Would you offer that the same solution that can be used at name the bank, name the commercial industry otherwise?
Absolutely. We've done work with, published work with Wells Fargo, with HSBC, with JP Morgan Chase just released a big paper where they worked with our systems. In fact, JP Morgan Chase has led our last round of investment. So this is something that the financial organizations are looking into very, very deeply, right? I'd say financial and military are always sort of the two driving forces for any new type of encryption or new type of security, and followed by then medical. But definitely finance and military are the big.
So if I wanted to use a commercial mobile device and I wanted to communicate on it and I didn't want to carry around a type 1 encryptor to encrypt that darn thing, I could use quantum enabled encryption and have a level of security and assurance that.
And this gets back to what I was saying earlier.
The reality of today's world.
We need to encrypt what people are doing, not force people to do things
Holy
in an
smokes,
unnatural,
really?
secure way,
Well,
right?
see so there you go, right? So one thing you Paul led off, and I go back to the training level, right? So this is kind of funny, right? Human error, right? Biggest factor in any of the compromises that we've seen, especially in the DoD, right? Human error. So when you go back to training, right? Philosophically, that changes, right? That's why I asked. Again, your training model for quantum expert Roy is significantly different for Nug Steve Trevino trying to learn how to secure a device. But at the same time, right? It shouldn't be the same training that we remember, right? Because you just mentioned it. What you've just mentioned isn't things. We don't need to train people to do certain things a certain way. We need to be able to secure the things they're doing.
Exactly.
That's significant, right? And so what does that look like?
So you mentioned, hey, we have to accept the fact that everyone's going to carry some commercial communication device, right? Which is probably true. But I can tell you why that is so dangerous and why I ask about the training, because, I spent quite a bit of time out in Ukraine before the invasion years ago, but it was amazing how the adversary could exploit mobile devices, right? Yeah. And not just using, collection, but it's like, hey, if I got your number, right, and I can give you an example. If I've got all your numbers, right, and let's say because there's an analog system somewhere, right, which there's still some in the world, but I want to jam that analog system, right, but I can't really reach it or do anything, right? I send text messages out to people, and I have them say, hey, you need to call this number, you need to call headquarters. And all of a sudden, there are like 2,000 or 3,000 people calling the number. Guess what I just did? I just effectively jammed that number without using any kind of EW capability.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, it is amazing how creative people can get in exploiting. So those are all things. That's why, we got to go back to the basics as we go forward as well.
I'm assuming there's lots of lessons that you guys.
I was actually going to use that as an example.
Oh.
So I've actually seen. I've had the privilege of observing the ability to break into mobile devices.
Yeah.
It is shocking what is possible, and
Terrifying.
it was originally
which is
a
why we're having these
tech.
conversations.
Oh,
People need to hear.
Well, it's frightening.
How scary this stuff really is.
It is frightening because people are doing it, right? So they're going to do it. Let's just all accept that. Like we're not going to replace the commercial mobile technology. Mm-hmm. They're going to do it. It's too easy to use and it's too freaking powerful. How do we mitigate the risk? So, for example, the radios on the devices can be exploited, right? Okay, well, let's figure out a way to mitigate the radio on the device. The encryption, the existing encryption can be exploited. It's going to be exploited heavily and increasingly so. How do we mitigate it? So the whole conversation should be like, let's not try to kill the device. Yeah. Let's not try to kill the device. Let's figure out how to identify the risks and mitigate the risks. And that, because if we try to force for example, the leaders, the command and control, the organizations that have to make decisions to try and wait on a government hardened, DoD hardened replacement tool, it won't work.
What's you were saying that Henry Ford, back when he first started making cars, if he listened to his people, he would have built a faster horse kind of. I mean, that's basically,
because they were scared that
that's basically
speed
what
was
we're
going to
talking
kill
about.
them.
We're not building any more horses.
By the way, his name is Michael Campbell. Pavoru does not speak for or represent anything, for SOFtact Solutions. Just so you know, I don't need any black choppers coming to my house. But
all of you guys, though, I mean, especially in the industry that both of you are in, I mean, the lessons that you're pulling out of Ukraine and what they have been able to, both sides of the conflict, forget about, the policies of it, but just what they are doing with mobile devices.
Well, and I'd give you an example along those lines. I just recently, and in my opinion, probably wasn't exactly something that should have been disclosed to me now as a civilian, but Ukraine frontline operations, guess what they still use? They freaking still use smartphones. Yeah. They use mobile devices on the front lines knowing the risks, right?
They did that, and then another thing that they use on the front lines now because of the risks, right? Old TA-312s.
Yeah. Hey, you know what?
Yeah. And they work.
They figure out a way to mitigate the risk, so that they still use the mobile devices to augment command and control systems.
The problem is you have everyone out there, right? Every private that's out there, and they're untrained because they ask us for training, right, to assist with training. But they got and it only takes one, right? It only takes one. And next thing you know, hey, you're going to
call a girlfriend and
the adversaries are very patient, right? And they don't have the same rules of engagement that we do, right? So they're like, hey, this was there 2 hours ago. Let's just go drop something on it, and hey, half the time they get lucky, right? Yeah, so it goes back to how do we not only secure those devices and encrypt everything, but how do we teach people really what the risks are and mitigate those risks.
And off that, right? So with all the lessons learned, Sam was just mentioning, things that you're getting back on that secure mobile side and things you're getting back from that, security side. We obviously, we whether in a green suit before or now, on the vendor side, there's always the naysayers, right?
Oh, yeah, they'll say.
We've got a varied amount of technologies, right, that have been introduced in a number of circles, but you always have the naysayers, right? I believe a lot of that has to do with information, right? I wouldn't call it education. I wouldn't call it, academics. It's basic information, which again, right, go back to Sam when he started us off on the podcast. It's the discussions that no one ever hears. It's the stuff that no one ever talks about, right? What they're actually doing, what information they're actually gathering, and what the outcome is because of that. Where do you see right now traction for Provoro, right? When you go up and say, hey, listen, I have a solution that mitigates the radio, that mitigates the camera, that essentially, solidifies your digital footprint, right? No one's going to intrude your mobile device. What level of interest outside of where we're at, partner with? What level of interest are you getting from the outside?
Well, I would use Paul's example, and I think that was a really good example. Look, there's a conflict going on, and there's a risk, a high risk, which is known, but maybe it's not trickling down to the it's not completely understood at the very lowest level, right? Or if it is understood, which is there's a chance that it is understood, it's such a great convenience that they're just like, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway, right? I had the privilege of spending time with a young infantry company exposing our technologies where we're able to physically mitigate the risks. And it was an awesome debate. Like, I honestly think to listen to a bunch of 18 to 25-year-old kids sit there and debate about the frontline combat value of a smartphone for various needs was awesome, right? Because none of us are going to do that anymore. And you had the naysayer that was like, that's the dumbest shit on the planet.
See?
We're never going to use those. There was like a 25-year-old like squad leader, I think, staff sergeant saying, I wouldn't give a smartphone to any of you idiots, right? Because you're just going to get distracted. I need you staring down that rifle. And then there was another kid who was like, we're going to use them whether you let us use them or not, right? I'm going to have it in my pocket, and I'm just not going to tell you. And we're probably going to text, and we're probably going to be better because of it, right? And then there was an older, he was the company XO, and he's like, look, I get it. You're telling me that I can mitigate the risk. I can let all these kids carry the tools that they either want or need, and you can mitigate the risk and make it easy. He's like, and he stood up in front of the entire room, and he goes, why wouldn't we do it? Yeah. We're idiots if we don't do it. And I felt like that was so cool to watch that kind of democratic discussion in an infantry platoon, right?
Well,
Those are the first guys that want to beat the hell out of each other.
The infantry and democratic are in the same sentence.
No, I would have never left that. I would have never said that was possible, but it was happening that day.
Okay, yeah. Some of us are a little bit older than them, yeah.
But you go back to you've had that conversation, but then back to the kind of the national level conversation that's been happening about this over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah. We
didn't have an 18-year-old private doing this. We had,
senior leaders.
And so what is it that we can do to do what you said, Roy, which is they need the speed to make decisions. How do we build something to achieve that?
Well, and I'll give you an example. So we've been talking about basically maneuver and edge stuff, but back at the headquarters, the risks or vulnerabilities of a commercial mobile device have been known. The United States has been, intelligence world has been breaking into mobile devices and exploiting it publicly anyway since the times of Pablo Escobar, right? Mm-hmm. Which is what, late 80s, early 90s? Mm-hmm. It's gotten so affordable that you could buy this stuff today, but definitely all nation states in the world have access to it. Our security professionals, they're called technical surveillance countermeasures professionals. They're very highly trained, and they've known this. And they started telling the leadership of government, not just the Department of Defense, but leadership of government, that a commercial mobile device is a highly exploitable device.
See?
Yeah. And the next thing you know, you're making money selling lockers, phone lockers outside the door. And that's your mitigate. That is your mitigation, or you leave them outside in the parking lot, right? Yeah. So great, you got phones stacked up outside the door. Nobody actually uses the world-class lockers that have become prevalent.
Well,
they just
half the
stack
time
them.
you got people sneaking them in anyway.
Yeah, or they leave them in the parking lot. But then what happens? And this is in the freaking Pentagon. the hallway, where at least there's phone coverage, is full of freaking people, including extremely senior leaders,
Once again,
on their freaking mobile devices, pounding away on them.
Bravoro. Michael Campbell.
All right.
Bravoro.
I got photographs because I was able to take my phone.
Yeah,
in there.
that stuff's public record. You can see all that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's actually public record of them in the hallways pounding away on their mobile devices, even though right there, just 20 feet away, is a world-class encrypted, top secret or higher communication system. They're not using it. Not convenient. Not convenient. Not convenient. Let me say that one more time. No, seriously, they're in the hallways.
So there's a lot of examples where we've done this in the past, right? Like after 9/11, a lot of people used their BlackBerries because of the challenges getting through the cell phone tower, and the BlackBerries used special messaging that actually worked on that day. So we went back, we saw that's the way people were using them and how useful they were. And we created the CryptoBerry, as we called it back in those days, that didn't route through multinational data centers, that went through U.S. personnel, that had a CAC sled so you could authenticate properly to the network, and found a way to make that use case, that sort of way in which people were being successful, secure. Not that we had thought about it ahead of time, not that it was pre-approved. They were in the moment. They had to react. The planes had hit the Pentagon. One plane had hit the Pentagon, and they had to respond to that. And the BlackBerry became the way to do it. And then we went and secured it as we observed that's the way they were doing it.
If I could give you an example, we build on that. And I wasn't there. I heard it secondhand. Thank God I wasn't there. But when the evacuation of Afghanistan occurs, right, it falls apart and everything's going to crap. Guess what? Every senior leader was grabbing. And they were just waving them in and out of that skiff, the most secure spaces, because of the need for urgent decision making. It was grab your smartphones because I need you to be in communication right now. So they were just grabbing them, and they were all on them. And they were nothing that was fixed infrastructure, encrypted, secure, was being used at a pace that could keep up with commercial mobile devices.
Well, right? I think you guys, so there's the messaging, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if we knew then what we know now, right? I think that's bullshit. But anyway,
what you know now,
the idea behind it is people are going to use them. It is the future, right? I think a lot of the things that Paul was mentioning, right? Some of the things that you use as examples, right, with regards to information. Maybe it's not the fact that they were given the information; it's how it was provided, right? I'm hoping that a forum like this and having a candid conversation, drinking beer, talking about ideas and how we solve problems together. Hopefully that resonates with someone that would watch this, right? And understand just how vulnerable, right? Just, the level of risk at the national level, all the way down
to the edge,
right? It is overly significant, right? It's bad. And if you can understand just a little bit, right, of what they're able to do, right? From what I understand, it's not just what they can grab or exploit. If our adversaries obtain some type of quantum solution, their advances in medical solutions or medical innovation, it's everything, right? Yeah. So a significant, geopolitical scenario there, a paradigm shift, if you will. It's huge, right? So people need to understand.
There's huge opportunities, and there's also, huge negatives if you're not the ones who are able to get there first.
Right, and I keep thinking that if we all just, I guess the fundamental premise that I like to think that we've agreed on here is we're going to carry the thing that is most convenient, that allows us to do our mission, execute our mission, or lead as effectively, right? It's always going to default to that. Yeah. If we accept that premise and we don't say that, no, it's just too freaking risky, we're going to replace the internet or whatever, we're going to replace the commercial mobile devices because those things are ridiculously they have a lot of risk. And they could be exploited. But if we say no, instead, those things are going to be used. The internet's going to continue to get used, and commercial mobile is going to continue to use. If anything, it's going to grow. Then what do? We mitigate the risk, right? We mitigate the risk.
I think again the messaging, Roy. I think you said it best. It's the first time I ever heard it in that aspect, right? It's
the light side and the dark side.
Well, no, it's a philosophical difference in training. Right, we need to secure the things that people are doing, not force them to do something. Right, that's significant. That's That's huge. Hey, this has been an awesome conversation. It's exactly how I wanted to happen. You guys don't cuss enough, so that's not as much fun. But listen, appreciate you guys coming out. Really do. I really want to continue this conversation. For those folks that are listening that dialed in, please come out to the booth at Soft Week. Paul, always great to see you. Definitely want to have you on future podcasts if there are any. We'll see how that works out. But your expertise, your experience is significant, and we definitely like you there. So Michael, with you again, Michael Campbell, Bravoro.
Gives away too much.
If there were three things, right?
Three things.
Three takeaways: Bravoro, Soft Week, security, mobility.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity. Look, the three things. One, it's gonna the commercial mobile industry, the commercial mobile device is the most dominant way of communicating. It is not going to change. So let's just embrace that it's going to happen. Department of Defense, intelligence community, the government, everyone's going to move to mobile. All this legacy wired crap's going to go away. So let's figure it out how to make it secure. The other is that it is happening. So this isn't hypothetical security. This is there are organizations that have embraced security from a mobile device perspective, and they are executing it. Like they're out there locking down those devices. They're not getting rid of them. They're just mitigating the risk. They figured out a way to leverage the demand for mobile and how to harden or mitigate the risk and allow it to grow. Be more. And those organizations, the last point, those organizations are demonstratively more effective than they were because they've embraced mobile. They are not doing this crap anymore. Pen and paper. They are sitting here with a mobile device, pounding away on the mobile device, whether it's in a team room or a command center or on the front lines. And it has made them more effective. So it's happening and it works. So let's when they say let's share, let's come by. We'll show you who's doing it now. They're doing it. Yeah,
come by the come by SOFtact Solutions booth over in Soft Week, and Michael and his team will be there, and we can carry on this discussion. If you'd rather have a beer afterwards, we can do that too. Roy, same question to you, right? Top three, right? If there's three big takeaways for anybody that's looking in or listening to this thing, what are those three things?
I like the theme that Michael laid down here, right? It's happening. And he's talking about, mobile devices being used in tactical environments. So I'm talking about quantum computing, right? Quantum computers have always seemed like something that's far off in the future, but they're happening. They're around today. We've been doing it for 10 years at Quantinium, and there are actual production solutions that were developed in a quantum computer that you can install in your computer today. And the third thing is it's going to change everything about encryption and networking over the next few years. So people need to be looking into it. They need to be preparing. They need to be understanding everything that they order, everything that they buy, everything that they deploy. They need to make sure that if it's not protected against the quantum threat, that it has a very short-term roadmap to being protected, and that it is, to your point, Sam, that it is field upgradable so that they don't end up with useless doorstops that are out in the field when they need secure communications.
There you go.
All right, you heard it. Before we move over to Paul, just so you guys, I think we failed to mention early on, both solutions, right? Both organizations are now a partnership and a single solution, right, if you will, all made in the USA, and so that's a good thing, right? I know that there are a number of CIOs and commanders out there that are having to mitigate, what they bring in as innovation. I know the supply chain is a significant issue for those folks where this stuff is coming from and where it's being made, and so want to make sure everybody understands and knows. Come by the booth again. Roy will be there. Mike will be there. These are the smart guys. You want to drink a beer and cuss a little bit, come see me. I might be there as well.
I'll do that too.
But Paul, listen, three things, right? Three things. Takeaways from the conversation discussions that we've had today, based on your experience, based on the time that you've been on the ground, and understand, right, from years ago, right, understood where the vulnerabilities and those risks were taking us. What are the big three takeaways? And I hope you scare some people, right? Because this is serious stuff.
So one, no matter where we go, what we do, whether it's quantum computers, securing devices, using devices, training is key. Right? We got to train people from the lowest level to the highest level. Right? For a while, it's going to be new, but this should be something that's taught in every basic training. Right? Mm-hmm. it should be a part of it that, hey, we're gonna teach you about the risk and the security, why you do and don't do certain things, right?
We should be teaching it in 5th grade.
Yes.
Security threats.
And it should be
That's a good point.
pounded in not only to the intel and the signal guys who, understand communications and networks more than others, but to the average Joe that's out there, that it's that's key. The second thing is a lot of the solutions, believe it or not, that we're talking about already exist, right? I mean, you have capabilities that, could be put into use today. You have advancements could be put into use today, which brings me to my third point, which is, and it's probably a topic for another roundtable, is, we got to improve the acquisition process and the speed that we can get those capabilities to the people on the ground.
That is certainly a tough.
And look, I'm not going to knock people. They've done better. In cyber school, in cyber force, we knocked down that training to the commandant could sign off on a percentage of the training, change the course immediately to keep up with advancements. Right? We have to get that same mentality out to everything else, right? We need to be able to put those, we need to be able to take your capabilities that work and figure out a way to get it to the people on the ground very quickly, because the speed that everything advances is only going to increase.
Agile.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it. Hey, listen again, for anyone who's listening or looking in, hopefully we didn't bore you too much. Great conversations, great discussions. Still a lot more to be had. Again, come join us at Soft Week. I think we'll have the ability for folks to ask questions, or people want to have interviews or sit down with you guys. We'll make sure we post the websites and post your contact info as well. If anybody wants to comment, have any interest in meeting, or just have questions overall. It may just be questions based on the company, or maybe the solutions you have. Paul, your experience likewise with Touchstone Futures and things of that nature. So
definitely,
we'll make certain we put that stuff out there so folks can get out. If there are any complaints, his name is Michael Campbell.
Bring it on. He loves that. Huh?
Bring it on.
But hey, Sam,
so just kind of close this out.
Yep.
I mean, when we do an event like this, and maybe hopefully we'll do more, but we're not doing this for us to talk, to try to figure out, to solve a particular problem. We're trying to have a discussion so that the people that are listening, the people that are in that picture that I have in my mind of the JCU alumni or the 112th alumni, or pick your industry partner at Soft Week, that they start thinking about what you guys are saying, with the idea of, we need to do this, or I have something that could potentially be brought to bear to integrate with what you're already doing, or hey, we've already gone down this road and you've missed the mark. If that's the case, then that's the case. But that's really what we're trying to do, is to get people to agree, disagree, give us feedback, but in the end, connect the right people that can solve problems. I mean, I don't know the first thing about quantum computing, but I know that it's probably like the next arms race. And like we didn't even talk about the power requirements, the national level requirements to do all the things that are required in whether it be in AI or in quantum computing. I mean, it's going to be a massive shift at a national level. And so there's the people that we're trying to support, we're a bunch of old guys now. They're the ones that are going to be at risk. They're the ones that we're still trying to figure out ways to make them more effective, because if we hadn't noticed, the world isn't getting any safer.
Right.
So I appreciate, shout out to Joy, our marketing guru, for twisting our arm to have us do this, and B, getting the team together. Look forward to seeing everybody at Soft Week. Michael has said that he's going to get at least 2 hours of sleep a night, every night.
At least 2.
At least 2 hours a night.
Get in there
standards.
And we're looking forward to seeing everybody there. And we're certainly looking forward to all your input on how this went and how you would do it differently.
His name is Michael Campbell.
And we'll take that feedback. We'll take those shots and hopefully get another round of folks in here under the bright lights here in the next month or so.
No, thank you. I
Thanks.
appreciate this.
Yeah, man.
This is great.